this was so important to the National Down Syndrome Society that we spearheaded the National Universal Design for Learning Task Force in 2006. It has now grown to a coalition of 41 national organizations representing general ed, higher ed, and special education interests. And this is pretty much everybody in education, both teacher unions, the local school boards, the state school boards, CCSSO, AASA, everybody, the whole alphabet soup, they're in there. And so, there really aren't big education groups that are going to be coming around saying we don't want this, because they're all in this coalition trying to promote it. And what they see their task as is promoting UDL in federal policy and legislation and dissemination of information on UDL. And you should have in your packet some handouts including their recommendations on ESCA for UDL. And we can always be of service to you if you need more guidance on how to do that. So now we get to the priorities. And I did this UDL because really you need that underpinning. If you can't teach students in the way they learn best and then help them demonstrate it in the way they know how to and give you that information, then most of the rest of this isn't going to work. So access to the curriculum. Clearly UDL is an important piece of this, and you can't get access to the curriculum, especially for this population of students, unless you're looking at that. You also need to be looking at communication. If they have no way to communicate, and that's a piece of UDL as well, that's a barrier. If they can't communicate what they know, then you're not doing that in a universally designed way. Another really big factor is what you know as the 1% rule, the rule for kids with the most significant cognitive disabilities that are taking the alternate assessments based on alternate academic achievement standards. And what started out as supposedly high expectations and a good standard has really turned out to work against our kids because of the way it's been implemented in large part. There are a lot of negative implications to being in this 1% rule for these kids. And it doesn't just stop at taking the test. And the test itself is a problem because in many places it's not properly aligned to the grade level content standard the way it's supposed to be. And the eligibility rules are not done very well because there are a lot of kids in there that really could be in other assessments. But because of the large cap, it's possible to have kids in there that really don't belong. And what we found is it's hopping out of these kids on that assessment. If you hear people say, oh, this is a population that brings our school down, well, that's wrong. They're actually bringing the school scores up, but not for a good reason. We have data from the states on an average, for example, in high schools in reading, that 70% of the kids that take that alternate assessment that have the most significant cognitive disabilities, supposedly, are proficient or advanced in reading, whereas only 25% of those high schoolers who have disabilities who take the regular test are proficient. And unless you truly believe that the kids who are taking the regular assessment get less access to the curriculum than the kids in the alternate assessment, which we know is not true, there's something not working out very well with those tests. Other problems are, for example, the least restricted environment, inclusion. We're finding that just by virtue of being placed in that 1% assessment, kids are being taken out of the regular environment if they were ever in there to begin with. And personally, I found that to be the case. My son did not take an alternate assessment until high school. The minute we said okay to put him in that alternate assessment, they wanted to pull him out of inclusion, even though he'd been successful for 12 years, 10, 11 years in the school system. There's also an issue of highly qualified teachers. Once a student is in a special education classroom solely for kids who take this alternate assessment, the highly qualified definition of teachers for those students has a lower standard. They don't have to have, in secondary school, they don't have to have a secondary certification. They don't have to be content trained for the grade in which that child's enrolled, which is a big problem if their assessment is supposed to be aligned with the grade level content for the grade in which they're enrolled. They don't have the same, as the kids in the 2% rule, the modified achievement standard. It says in those rules that the kids are not precluded from the opportunity to get a diploma, whereas that language, it doesn't exist in the 1% rule. So in most places you can't get a diploma once you're put in that assessment. You can't even try to get a diploma. That they don't get standards-based IEPs, or at least that's not guaranteed in the regulations. That it says access to the curriculum will be promoted. It doesn't say will be provided. So there are a lot of different ramifications, and that's just some of them that occur from being in this assessment, and all those will need to be addressed. Priority 2, inclusion in general education settings. We've talked a lot about that today. Obviously, we need to have more educators and school personnel have adequate preparation and supports, preparation in terms of UDL, but also in terms of special ed training for general education teachers. LEAs need to implement collaborative teaching models. We need to incentivize professional development regarding students with severe disabilities. And some of these examples I'm giving you are just a few that are in your packet that come under these priorities in the document this group has put together. Priority 3, inclusive charter schools. There will be a briefing sometime in the future just on charter schools, so I'm not going to get into a whole lot of detail on that, but we do need to say that one of the big concerns is that a lot of parents of kids with significant cognitive disabilities, intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities are being discouraged from applying to being part of that process for charter schools. And if they are in any charter schools, they're usually in segregated charter schools, and that's something we don't want to see continue. Priority 4, increasing funding for family and community involvement in inclusion. I think it was Dr. Saylor's slide, he pointed out very much the importance of family involvement in making this whole education system work. I think we all know that intrinsically that's a really important piece. But there are some important things that need to be done to make that happen. Parents of kids who have intellectual disabilities are very often isolated and alienated from the whole process. And we need to bring them in and help them support their children's education. As I said, I have a law degree, and I felt a lot of times that I was being led down the path, and it was a struggle for me to advocate for my son. And so you can only imagine parents who this may be their second language, or they may have 3 jobs, or they may have whatever other things that are barriers to having them be as involved, to be able to try to get their kids to be included and to get access to the curriculum. We need to redefine and to incentivize family involvement and local solutions. We need better monitoring and oversight of parental involvement provisions that already exist. And there needs to be statewide infrastructure for family involvement. Priority 5, effective transition strategies. There will be next Friday at noon, I believe, there's going to be another briefing specifically on the TEAM Act, which is a big piece of getting transition strategies going. In addition to other examples are grants for local transition coordinators. My son's now in transition age, so I know this is very important, that there's not enough people to really, and there's not enough knowledge really, to take kids who haven't even successful all along the way and then translate that into something meaningful for them as they transition out of school. And better uses of the summaries of academic and functional performance reports to help these kids for post-secondary education as well as for employment. So you'll hear a lot more about transition if you come to the briefing next Friday. But these are basically the 5 priorities. As I said, you have a much longer document that has all the details and the rationales and the research and a lot of different suggestions for how to make these educational reforms work. But thank you